collaboration with GIZ, organized Ghana Reform Dialogue with the theme Ghana Digitalization Agenda on the Fourth Industrial Revolution with the aim to drive dialogue and to ensure effective reforms in order to look at the baseline that explore the issues around e-levy data.
Now, the basis of government introducing this has been based on four key areas. One is on the government has been arguing that, okay, let me start it this way. The first point is that government argues that the purpose here is to tax industry. So that's the first point. But then there are four key points that they are looking out to. They are saying that it is to help them to pay government contractors. It is also to help them to support entrepreneurship, cyber security issues, and digital security issues. And then it's also to help in developing road infrastructure. And then it's also to help create jobs for about 11 million people.
According to the financial economist consultant Mr. King Kao, in his interview said that the public opinion has a role to play in the implementation of e-levy.
We see that a number of people are still transacting, but the volume of transaction has reduced. In fact, about 83% of the people indicated that their volume of transaction has reduced. And some of them, it has reduced by more than 100%. Some of them, it has reduced by more than 50 to 100%. And then if you see in total, only about 3% of the people are still transacting in that context. And also we asked them whether they are even in support of the e-levy altogether. And you see that about 97% of the people indicated that they are not in support of the e-levy. And then if they were to even try to pay, if they have to pay, then they should be able to pay something lower than the 1.5% that has been accepted as what has to be paid. And then also we looked at whether they have been shifting away. And we see that over time, a number of them are shifting to the various traditional forms banking activities. Some of them are going into the mainstream banking. Some of them are using fiscal cash. And you see that more than 70% of them are doing some of these things. So there's a kind of coping strategy. They are trying to avert and use for various loopholes to be able to move away. Yes, we are looking at the volume and the value. And then what we see is that both the volume and the value is reducing. What it means is that the number of times that the people are able to transact has reduced. So if the person has to engage, transact maybe about 6 transactions in a week, that has been reduced. Then also the value has also reduced. So what it means is that the money that the government will be able to raise will reduce eventually. And we believe strongly that based on the results we have gotten, this could be what the data will show when the data starts coming out from the various collecting.
So tentatively, this is
of a 2.5 week data collection process. We started on the first of May, and then the 1st of June, and then 31st of June, and then we ended on the 17th of June. 31st of May, and then we ended on the 17th of June. Okay. The first May. So what we did is that after 1 month of implementation, what is the reaction? Okay. So it's kind of a baseline study of this is what the reality is, this is what is on the ground, so that we'll be able to shape policy with it. First is that government calculations are not, they may not be forthcoming. The revenue collection that the government predicted, the government may not get that. The attrition rate is higher than what is expected. And what it means is that government will not be able to raise. So we have to start engaging and rationalizing the whole policy. Do we want to still continue with it, or do we want to shape it? How do we shape it? And I think that we have to do this with the data. So once the data trickle in, let's try and look at it and shape policy. From the Vice President Office and the GRA, they all alluded to the fact that the results are things that show kind of reality of what is on the ground. But what they did is to have some kind of data point of maybe MTN or Vodafone indicating to them that, okay, for this first day, this is what we have gotten. But the fact is that the figures are reducing. People are changing, there are behavioral issues. So people are adjusting to alternative sources. So we have to look at it. This is kind of, it is not a forceful, you are not forced to use mobile money. It's on your own volition. So people are adjusting. So we have to look at it. Based on what we have now, government will not be able to achieve it based on the attrition rate.
Takes, let's say, 5% of a bigger pie is probably much more than seeking to take 40% of a smaller pie, or if you take everything. So let's look at it from that way. And at some point in time, we need to package our tax handles as an enabler. Okay. to get a fair deal. And I believe that we should also be looking at the digitization within a certain whole economic and value chain and see how the various players fit into that across the various segments of society, from education, that's implication for labor market outcome, and the rest of them. And I believe that a lot of these things, and also look at the whole procurement of the digitization drive from the seat of government, right? And all of that, and see how private sector also fits in within greater perspective of transparency and disclosure. They all matter because trust is important. One of the things technology can do is to undermine trust in government institution and democratic institution, and by the time you realize this whole thing could be a zero-sum game. We realize that our policy rate probably is one of the highest in Sub-Saharan Africa, if not the highest or the second. Okay, that itself is already very high, and yet the threat of inflation is still real and all of that. Then in that case, you want to look at the fiscal side, okay, and see whether how the fiscal side can also control all of that. But if you see the trend that inflation has been going up probably since last year, even before Russia invaded Ukraine, then you know that part of this also is not just imported, right, but local and all of that. But I understand that the government is doing all it could, challenges with fertilizer and issues and the rest of them. It's that uncomfortable, but of course you also want to look at it within a certain regional context, sub-regional context. So you want to go to Ghana, compared to Nigeria, and then even if you go to the East African countries and the rest of them, you see variations. Also, that tells us there's a lot that we should be doing locally in order to cushion Ghanaians, okay, and which explains the variations that we see in terms of the exposure and the rest of them. So I'm hopeful. Okay, I'm hopeful that the government will take the right decisions. Right now, since the last announcement in terms of the enhanced measures after the presentation of the 2022 budget, from the fiscal side, we haven't seen much. So hopefully there will be a lot of expectation in terms of the media review, right? So probably the media review may be more than just a media review. Perhaps it may also be a platform for certain policy initiatives, probably. And one of the things I'm looking forward to government doing something about is the E-Levy in the media review. Probably, even if they don't want to scrap it, they should be looking at the rates.
Okay. Now,
I want to look at the dynamics, okay, and how each quarter will subsequent quarters and the rest of them. So I believe that as for projections, it's so easy to do that, but every projection is as good as assumptions and aligning those projections and all of that. So I want to give government the benefit of the doubt in terms of the projections that we have. We've seen also the projections from the IMF and then other think tanks and the rest of them. But the most important thing is that we've seen some level of momentum that probably we can sustain and build on. And that is why we were uncomfortable with the introduction of E-Levy and all of that. Because if you're looking at the digital economy also driving overall picture, then you don't introduce this on go somewhere along the line.
all right, finally.
The problem may not be so much of we not generating a lot of revenue. We know that is a challenge, but the problem is much more of our expenditure.
You think this is where the
Regularities, this is where the size of government comes in. Look, we know that the government size is very big, right? Without development like this, there will never be any incentive for you to cut down on government size. So this is the best platform. Okay, this is the best platform. If you fail to do that now, then when are you going to get that done? Because increasingly, it's obvious that the economy cannot bear the size of government that we are running. Okay, across different layers and the rest of them. So we should be looking at the bigger picture and the bigger reform, productivity enhancing reforms, both in the public sector, because an inefficient public sector represents cost to the private sector as they interact with the public sector. Basically. Thank you. My name is Professor Godfred Alufa Bokmi with the University of Ghana, Lagos.
all right, thank